So this is chapter 4 of my book. The epigraph is from Anna East Nin. My father, I think of him as someone my own age. When I was very young, my paternal aunts, June and Wanda, would come to visit me in Pittsburgh. My grandmother Parmalee's fragile health made travel problematic. My mother wanted me to have a relationship with them, so she made the trip to Missouri. But Mom had to work, so when I was 4 years old, I flew to St. Louis alone for the first time. The stewardess gave me a special kid flying alone wings pin and a certificate. They took me to visit the pilot. The plane landed and Aunt June was waiting for me at the gate. She was the eldest in her family and the only one who had gone to college. She had chestnut hair, always coiffed and rigid with hairspray. She had shiny blue eyes like her father. Everyone else in her family had brown eyes. She was always dressed in crisp, modern outfits with matching bracelets and necklaces and purses. The minute I saw her, I was filled with excitement. We walked briskly through the airport hand in hand, two single independent women. Sometimes we would stay in St. Louis for a while, attend a musical, go sightseeing, or to a restaurant. There was a restaurant in St. Louis called Cyrano's. As you entered, there was a painting of Monsieur de Bergerac. I knew about him because my mother had been to the play and I had read her ragged copy of the playbill. The restaurant served ice cream covered in a hard chocolate shell that you cracked with your spoon. It was a very exotic world. Back in Aunt June's apartment, on hot St. Louis evenings, my pajamas clinging to my skin, we performed one of our many rituals. Tell me again. I extended my leg, pointed at the perfectly round, flat, dark spot on the inside of my left thigh. What's this? Aunt June played the moment as if it wasn't the one we had performed 1,000 times. She tilted my leg and looked at the spot. Oh, that's the Parmalee beauty mark, she said. But you're getting too big. Maybe we should skip the ice cream for a while. I went to sleep knowing that I was marked for beauty, but only if I could lose some weight. In the morning, we drove south to Fredericktown, where Aunt Wanda and my grandmother lived. On the drive, Aunt June would entertain me with the same little jokes every year. Can I hold your palm olive? Not on your life, boy. Repeat after me. Owa, owa, tagu, tagu, siam. Okay, say it all really fast. Owa tagu siam, owa tagu siam. The same jokes every year, and every year I laughed adoringly. She corrected my Pittsburghese pronunciation. Instead of downtown, I should say downtown. Instead of you going down there, I should say, are you going down there? Once we entered Fredericktown, I began to look for the little white house with the big front porch. There was a sign on one side of the stairs which read Wanda's Beauty Salon. Grandmom and Aunt Wanda would be waiting for us on the porch. I hugged them, and then ran to the side yard to pick a plum from the tree. The house sat on a fairly large piece of land. In the back, Grandmom had a vegetable garden where she grew corn and tomatoes. She couldn't really do the work, so she paid an African-American man to tend the lot. He'd bring her armloads of cucumbers and tomatoes and corn, and then stand at the back door telling her the town news. Their chatting seemed amiable, but she never let him in. She barely opened the screen door. There wasn't a lot to do in a small town. If I had trouble making friends in Pittsburgh, it seemed impossible in Fredericktown. Grandmom and the aunts were extremely protective. They never really wanted me to be out of their sight. I could sit on the broad white banister of the front porch while my grandmother rocked in the swing, but we couldn't stay on the porch too long because grandmother's health dictates required a cooler space. When I spent the summer in Fredericktown, I was physically idle, reading and watching television. In Pittsburgh, we walked everywhere, up and down hills. Missouri was flat, and Fredericktown was spread out. It was a small town, a farm town. Yards were bigger and planted with food and flowers, and it was hot. We drove everywhere in air-conditioned cars. Aunt Wanda's beauty salon was in the front of the house. All day, the sound of women and gossiping and the smell of hairspray poured from behind the curtain in the door. Aunt Wanda did hair for many of the women in Fredericktown. I peeked around the curtain and waited till one of the women called me in to grill me with questions. Did I like Fredericktown? Wasn't the country quieter than the city? Didn't so-and-so's perm look nice? My grandmom watched 3 or 4 soap operas every day. She called them her stories. It was best not to interrupt her during story time. I preferred sitcoms like The Andy Griffith Show or I Love Lucy, and I was the guest. I knew that if I got to the television first, I could watch my shows. I played this coy game until Aunt Wanda came out of her beauty shop and told me to put Grandma's stories on. Grandmom would meekly protest and then lean into the television. Grandmom fixed me big lunches with pot pies, homegrown corn on the cob, and tomatoes, which I ate on a tray in front of the television. Sometimes as a treat, one of the aunts took me to get a hamburger and french fries at the A&W drive-in. We sat in the car with clunky trays attached to the window. Our burger and fries were served in a plastic basket, and we always got a root beer float. In the evening, Aunt Wanda worked at the drive-in movie theater. She was single and childless, and she loved spending her hard-earned money on me. I took every advantage of her generosity. I needed a constant supply of Betty and Veronica and Archie comic books to read when Grandma's stories were on. I went to the drive-in, ate popcorn, drank Coke, and watched the previews of coming attractions while Aunt Wanda took tickets. Occasionally, we stayed for the movie. Aunt June went back to St. Louis to work during the week. Before she left, she would take me to the library. I would borrow a stack of books like Strawberry Girl by Lois Lenski and The Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. When the weekend came, I would wait on the porch, watching for her car, eager to tell her my impressions of the books. In the evenings before bed, we read together. There was a small hole in the wall above the bed, left perhaps by a nail. Aunt June and I would tell each other stories about the little woman who lived in it, Miss Hoffentoffy. On Friday, Aunt June arrived at my grandmother's house with a double brownie sundae from the Dairy Queen. It was much grander than a simple ice cream cone, and it was being delivered by my shiny city aunt. I took my first bite. Enjoy that because we need to get you on a diet tomorrow. I wanted to please her. I also wanted the ice cream. My eyes filled with tears, my throat tightened. I choked down every bite. On one of the hottest days in August, Grandmom and I stood waiting for the Greyhound bus. We were headed to St. Louis because Grandmom had an appointment with her doctor. The heat blurred perception. Grandmom waved the bus tickets in front of her face, reaching down to tug at the elastic band that held her stockings rolled up just above her knees, and heaved a sigh of the much burdened. She seemed determined to spend every minute making it clear that the journey was a trial. I was wearing a candy cane striped sundress and white leather sandals. Dressed in such filigree, I felt ready for adventure. I danced in circles trying to keep her spirits high. When the bus arrived, I boarded and headed straight for the back seat. My grandmother tried in vain to talk me into a seat in the middle of the bus. I don't remember why I was so adamant. I vaguely remember feeling like it would be more fun to sit in the back. Grandmother's face took on a grimace that lasted for the entire trip. She dabbed herself with her handkerchief, clutched her handbag to her chest, and pushed repeatedly at her horn-rimmed glasses. I smiled broadly at everyone in the seats around us, none of whom would meet my gaze. Aunt June met us at the bus station in St. Louis. We were barely any distance from the bus and the other passengers when Grandmother spat. She made us sit in the back with all the niggers. I had never heard that word. I had never heard any word spoken with such vitriol. I knew my grandmother to be an unpleasant woman given to complaining. I knew she didn't talk to the man who worked in her garden with the screen door between them, but she did talk to him. There was something about the use of this word that shocked me to attention. Aunt June changed the subject and hurried us into her air-conditioned car. My aunt and later my mother tried to explain racism to me. They both characterized it as the ideas of a few people and not something that either of them endorsed. They minimized racism for me. Racism was just faulty reasoning on the part of a limited few. They did not address the shockwave that hit my body when I felt the hatred coming out of my grandmother. I loved my grandmother. I didn't want to think badly of her. It was easier to accept that she just had some bad ideas. In deference to my maternal grandmother, the aunts and my paternal in deference to my maternal grandmother, the aunts and my paternal grandmother didn't talk about my father. When I asked questions, they gave oblique answers. In Fredericktown, there was a picture of my father on the dresser in the bedroom where I slept. It was a picture of him as a young, handsome man. In the too hot to sleep Missouri nights, cicadas droning, I would look at the picture, lit by the moon streaming through the window, and quickly look away. He was so nice to look at, but I didn't want to like him. My mother was all I needed. The summer would end and I would go home to her. Every summer I went back a little fatter.